Hey everyone. Today we're going to take a look at sentences, how they're structured, how they're created, and also some of the main errors that occur with sentences, sentence fragments, and run-on sentences and comma splices. So starting off, we need to kind of understand the concept of what makes a sentence a sentence. Every sentence has to have a subject and an action. So the subject is the person or the thing who is doing the action. Without either of those two things, we end up with a sentence error called a fragment, which we'll cover in a moment. And the other thing is that a sentence has to make sense on its own. It has to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, and I should be able to walk into a room and say it, and it should be able to make sense to everyone in the room, even if they may be a bit confused about what I'm talking about. Structurally, it will make sense. So I got a couple examples here that we can take a look at. So the first one is, the dog ate its food. So here I've highlighted dog because the dog is the subject. And I have highlighted ate because that is an action. It's something you can do. So this dog, the subject, ate its food, the action. Because of that, if I said the dog ate its food, I can imagine all of you would say that that would make sense. So it checks all of our boxes, making it a complete sentence. Another example here, my brother always steals my Nintendo Switch. So I've got my brother, subject, and I've got steals, which is an action, action. Does it make sense? My brother always steals my Nintendo Switch. For the most part, structurally, as long as you know what a Nintendo Switch is, this should make sense to most people. Therefore, we check off the subject, the action, it makes sense, bang, we've got a complete sentence. So what happens when we remove one of those things, a subject or an action? Inherently, the sentence won't make sense, and we end up with what's called a sentence fragment. So if you look at a mirror, you see a complete version of yourself in a bathroom mirror or something like that. But if you smash that glass and all the pieces go on the floor and you stand over top of that mirror, and you look down, you actually don't see a complete version of yourself. You see yourself broken up into a bunch of pieces that are disjointed and aren't connected. So another word for a piece of glass or a broken piece of something is a fragment. So when we say sentence fragment, we're talking about broken pieces of complete sentences. A sentence fragment is a sentence error that occurs when a phrase is missing its subject or its action. So like I said, if you think about a mirror, it shows a whole image, then it becomes fragments when it's broken. So only parts of the image can be seen, and it's disjointed and it doesn't look right. Just the same way a sentence, which is missing a subject or an action, won't exactly sound right. So let's read this sentence here. Always want to do best in school. Okay, so here we go. We've got an action for sure. Do best, right? I want to do my best. So that's an action. Who wants to do my best? We don't actually know. We can guess. We could say, I always want to do my best in school, but we don't know that based on what I've written here. It could say, my mother always wants to do my best, or me to do my best. We have to be very clear in all of our sentences what the subject is, and if we don't have a complete subject there, it is a fragment. So the way to fix that is to add in a subject. In this case, I added the word I, because that makes the most sense. So we end up with, I always want to do my best in school. Always want to do my best in school may sound close to correct, and sometimes when the way we speak is not grammatically correct. Actually, a lot of the times we speak. But we have to get into the habit of recognizing when we're missing these things in our writing, and it's sometimes in the way we speak too, which will help us identify these errors when we do them in our writing. Let's look at another example here. Been together for 20 years now. You might hear someone say something like that and it would make sense, but we don't know who's been together for 20 years now. My dog and my cat, my aunt and uncle, we don't know. Well, without that, it's a fragment, it's a piece, it's an incomplete sentence. So I've added a solution here. We have been together for 20 years now. We were missing a subject, so I added it in there. Now, if we look at the sentences below, so how many times did Bobby go up the stairs? Well, if I say how many times, that's a fragment because we don't know what or where. We're missing a subject and we're missing an action. So from how many times, which is a fragment, we can add words to create a complete sentence. How many times did Bobby go up the stairs? So we've got a subject and we've got an action. It makes sense. We fixed that fragment to make a complete sentence. Let's try this one. Sleeping in next weekend. That is a fragment. We don't have a subject. We also don't really have a complete action, but we'll get to that later. I will be sleeping in next weekend. That fixes the problem because we've added this subject here where it's yellow. I could say, my brother will be sleeping in next weekend. My parents will be sleeping in this weekend. It really is depending on the context of what you're trying to say, but that's the trick. We don't ever want, as writers, to make our readers guess what we're trying to say. They need to know what we're saying by reading what we've written. They don't have the luxury of being able to tap us on the shoulder and say, wait, who's sleeping in next weekend? We have to tell them that. It's not up to them, it's up to us. And that's a tough lesson to learn as a writer. We always assume that people will get what we're saying, but I imagine lots of you have had uncomfortable text conversations because you missed words out and you think, well, how could that person not understand? But they didn't understand because you didn't explain it to them correctly. This is a trick one. Look out. Most people see that as a fragment. They're like, well, there's no subject. There's not really an action. It's a bit of a tricky exception to the rule because it's called an implied subject. When we say look out, I'm telling someone to do something. So I could say, hey, you look out, or, Shelley, look out, and that gives a subject. But if I yell look out, it means I am talking to someone specifically, and I'm telling them to do this thing. Therefore, it is a fragment. And those will come up, and you can ask me questions about those if you see them come up in your work.